Hello and welcome to our 7-8 minutes of weekly Torah Talk. Our guest today is Rabbi Eric Yoffie, President Emeritus of the Union for Reform Judaism. Hello, Rabbi.
Hello, Shmuel.
Thank you for being with us. Our Parsha this week is Bamidbar, the first Parsha in Sefer Bamidbar, Numbers. In this Parsha, the topics we have the names of the tribe chieftains, we have the census counting the people of Israel. We have something about the roles of the tribe of Levi, redemption money for firstborns, the role of the Kehat family in carrying sacred objects of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle in the desert. The parsha begins with this: וידבר אדוני אל משה במדבר סיני באוהל מועד באחד לחודש השני בשנה השנית לצאתם מארץ מצרים לאמור שאו את ראש כל עדת בני ישראל למשפחותם. On the first day of the second month, in the second year following the exodus from the land of Egypt, the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting, saying, take a census of the whole Israelite community by the clans of his ancestral houses, listing the names, every male, head by head. This makes for quite a boring parsha, isn't it?
Well, all the words of Torah are important, but they aren't necessarily interesting. But the census, I mean, it's true. This is a portion that deals with administrative matters, informational issues. So on the face of it, it doesn't grab us. But nonetheless, if we take another look at the census, and we go beyond the administrative questions that we can return to, there's a moral message here that seems to me is very, very important. I mean, why do you really need a census, of course, is a question.
Well, there are actually two questions. Why do we need census to begin with? And then why do we need to know about this census today? Why do we still read the parsha that deals with the census that took place thousands of years ago?
And, you know, the one immediate answer is, well, you need it for administrative purposes, for taxing purposes, for war purposes, in order to prepare for military campaigns. But then the commentators say, look, it's God who asked for the census, and we're dealing with God who took them out of Egypt, who split the sea, who appeared at Sinai. God couldn't come up with a number? An estimate wouldn't have been good enough. So why exactly do you have to do all of this counting? And that, you know, it's an important question. Now, some of the commentators say you do it for God's sake, and they talk about it's like a man who has these jewels, and every now and again he wants to take the jewels out and look at them.
Right.
So we're doing it so, you know, God will have this list, and from time to time God will review the list, and it will give him pleasure. But a much better answer comes from Rashi. And Rashi says, this is done out of love for the children of Israel. This is an act of love for the children of Israel.
Because they were dear to him, that's what he says.
Right, exactly. Mitoch batam, it says.
Right.
So why is it an act of love? And the answer to that question here is, you're dealing with people who were slaves, who were an undifferentiated mass, who had no individual identity of any kind, who couldn't even think in terms of taking on religious commitment, traditional commitment, relating to God even. But then God says to them, I'm going to count you as individuals. And how does he count them? In the verse that you just read, I think you read the Hebrew, Mishpachotam levet avotam b'mispar shemot.
Listing the names, every male.
Counted them by name.
Right.
Which is extraordinary. A Malbim, who's a 19th century commentator, says they actually wrote their names in a book.
Name by name?
Name by name. B'shemot, the Hebrew specifies they do it by name. And
well, that's one book we would like the archaeologists to find.
Right. And what could be more cumbersome a system I mean, why not simply line them up and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? That's how you would count if you wanted to do it quickly. They actually came up and wrote them by name. And Saforno, who's a 16th century Italian commentator, said, well, why did they do that? Because from that point on, they had a name. They were known by their names and by their personal characteristics. It was an extraordinary statement about the worth of the individual, which was being bestowed upon them because they had to give their name, and it was by virtue of their names that they were counted.
Right.
I like to tell the story. I was the editor of the Reform magazine. We had 350,000 households and so on. I used to get letters from people. They'd say to me, "You spelled my name wrong." And on the one hand, it used to aggravate me. I'm saying, look, we have all these names. You're getting the magazine. What's the problem? But the name it's the essence of who we are. It's how we identify ourselves. When you get to know a person, you get to know his name.
Right.
God knew Moses by name, and Moses knew God by name. And so name an individual worth upon us that we begin to understand the significance of this census.
Right, and some of the commentators also find meaning in the fact that this Parsha is read every year in the week, in the Shabbat before the holiday of Shavuot, just before we remember the Mount Sinai and the giving of the Torah.
Right. And well, that raises another, kind of interesting question, and maybe we could talk about that, Matt. Sort of a discontinuity between what happens at Shavuot next week and what we see here in this issue of inclusion. Because at Sinai, V'yatnu kol ha'am, all the people answered to God.
As one.
And as one, but they all answered, kol ha'am.
Right.
What's interesting about the sentences is who is counted. In rabbinic literature, the number they come up with is 603,000. And generally speaking, in rabbinic literature, when they talk about 600,000 Israelites.
Right.
600,000 isn't everybody.
No,
it's not kol ha'am. So this is kind of a jarring departure from that. And who's counted? Only the men. Only the men who are 20 years and
20
older.
years and older, right.
Right, those who have an ability to bear arms. So it's an exclusive count. It leaves out a lot of people. It leaves out women. It leaves out children. It leaves out teenagers. It leaves out those who are too old to be able to bear arms. It leaves out the disabled. It leaves out the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude who travel with them. So it's a count that's not an inclusive count. But then when we go to Sinai, we see exactly the opposite. All the people answer as one, and they are all present, when they receive Torah, whatever their status.
Right. And why is this? What meaning do you find in this connection? Why do they count only the male above 20, but then give the Torah to everybody else?
Well, the limited answer is, again, it's done for military purposes, but feminist commentators and others who care about these issues note that that's not the problem so much as the references throughout rabbinic literature tend to focus on this number and to identify the 600,000 with the people of Israel, when in fact it is not the people of Israel. So what we do in our day is we need to correct for that rabbinic perspective, and we have to see the people of Israel in a much broader, more inclusive way.
So it's not correcting the exact words of the Torah, which is that only men above 20 were counted, but rather correcting the interpretation of this command.
Exactly. So I mean, it's interesting. 600,000. If there are really 600,000 men who are able to bear arms, that probably would mean that if you looked at the entire mass of the people who made their way through the Midbar, through the wilderness, you're probably talking about several million people, which is extraordinary. And all of the historians and archaeologists tell us it couldn't possibly have been that number. Of course, we don't know for sure. But
not until they find this book that we talked about.
Right, exactly. With the name names in it, but it's interesting to think of this massive number, millions of people under the direction of God making their way through the wilderness to the land of Israel.
Rabbi Yoffie, thank you very much for being with us.
Good to be with you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.